A few housekeeping points to make before. Please can I advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from. In addition, a video recording of the meeting is made publicly available. Please can I remind all participants to speak clearly, remember to use your microphone. In addition, please speak directly into the microphone. Do not turn away when speaking. This is to ensure that your comments are picked up for the audio and video recording, as well as improving audio. Please can you also ensure that your mobile phone or any other electronic device is on silent. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, our fire alarm will sound. Please follow any instruction given to you by staff or by firemen. All the fire exits are marked by the green exit. Please proceed quickly and calmly to the assembly point, which is gardens, and do not use the lift. I welcome members of the public to the meeting this morning. When we get to public participation in the agenda, if you would like to come forward to the empty desk in front of you, the microphone is activated by pressing the large button on the base, and as you know, you will have 3 minutes to make your contribution. The timer will appear on the screen, so the time. First item on the agenda is apologies. I have apology from Gil from TACT.
No, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. The second item is disclosures of interest. The personal but non-pecuniary interest as a county councillor. I have 2 requests for councillors to speak. Councillor Reid and shall I assume that you will speak on the particular agenda items when we come to them? Thank you very much indeed. Next item of business is public participation, and Patrick Davis to speak. So Patrick, great.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to raise 1 or 2 points. Faded. 1 or 2 points about the way forward now on major issues in the town area of the city, if you see what I mean. Believe it or not, all those years ago when I was a city councillor, we were nearly agreed on a development brief for behind me, which was then called Silver Hill. And we all know what's happened in the decade and a half since then. Frankly, nothing very much. I'm interested to know the way forward now on that and all the other schemes in the city centre, which so much affect local people. I notice in the papers that have come out since I requested to speak that you are proposing some revisions of the way that these matters may be dealt with. But it seems to me that what we fundamentally need is to involve the public at the first possible opportunity. This keeps fading, sorry. So that people can feel involved in what is happening, and not when you've already effectively made up your mind about the way forward. I notice in the press release that you issued there's a certain degree of smugness about it, but you did actually acknowledge the need, and I just quote what you said, we need to listen better and work alongside people and businesses in Winchester, etc. It seems to me that if you're going to do that, you need to set out those rules very clearly so people understand what is happening and that they can be involved properly from the very beginning. I've always been against secret meetings, gatherings, member briefings, all the events that happen behind closed doors where the public don't know what's happening. And it seems to me that system has got to end. The other thing I just wanted briefly to mention was the town forum. which effectively is, give or take, a one-party state now, and with 4 of you cabinet members on it, it really doesn't fulfil a meaningful role for the people living in the town. It has less involvement than a parish council. And I do think that that needs to be reviewed. When it was set up, there were 3 parties represented on it, and it was a much fairer arrangement. Now it seems to not have the powers of a parish because it can't comment on planning matters, which are the matters that seem to affect people most locally. I also think there are other issues that need to be addressed. This may seem off the point, but it isn't. On the council website, the up-to-date information about several of the things I refer to, hopelessly out of date. Even on the local plan issue, the last thing there talks about consultation nationally. It's about the long-lost planning bill. No mention whatever of the new bill, which is there in front of Parliament, and which surely the City Council needs to be involved in. I've run out of time.
Thank you very much indeed, Davis, for those points. And I appreciate the concerns that you are raising. Be touching on the issue of how we engage in major projects shortly, and also the question you raised about the council website and the information upon it. In terms of the town forum, I'm more than happy to talk to the chair of the town forum and have a discussion with you, him, depending on what the decision is, about local town involvement. Let's move to the next item of business, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of March. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions on it? Or thank you. The next item is the appointment of members. So this is effectively a repeat of an announcement I've already made at full council, but I'm very happy to do it here and perhaps provide a little bit more perspective. The new structure of Cabinet is structured around the challenges we face and the priorities we'll be discussing later in the meeting. We as a council do continue to face major challenges. We have said that we will go greener faster, cannot be complacent about the economic recovery. We need to be efficient in keeping costs down. Many people are facing very challenging times at the moment. It's vital for us to protect services and support the most vulnerable. And as Mr. Davis referred to, we do need to listen better and work alongside the people and business and district in tackling the challenges. So the structure of Cabinet reflects that, and I am very grateful to all the councillors who have agreed to serve this council and its residents and members. So in addition to my responsibilities of leader, I will also be the Cabinet member for asset management. I'm delighted that Paula Ferguson will be leader and Cabinet member for City and Housing. I've talked about the need to go greener faster, and so I'm extremely pleased that Tony has agreed to be Cabinet member for climate emergency. Talked about the importance of business, but we're extending it to have a greater focus on culture, so core city in our district, and pleased that Lucille Thompson has agreed to be the Cabinet member for culture. We wouldn't be able to do anything without sound finances, and so I'm extremely pleased that Margot Power has agreed to be Cabinet member for finance and value. The local plan is great interest and important district and is absolutely underpins everything else that we're trying to do in terms of shaping the future. So I'm delighted that Becky Porter has agreed to be a cabinet member for place in the local plan. And finally, touched on the question of finding information on the website earlier. Service quality and how we are as a council to deal with is absolutely at the core of what we do. And if we don't get that right, then nothing else will work. So I'm delighted that Russell Gordon-Smith is a cabinet member for service quality. I'd also like to thank Lucille Thompson for her leadership of the council over the last 3 years and of the group for the last 7 years. She led us as a group to control of the council, and then she led us through the pandemic, and anybody who wasn't there in the council can't fully comprehend quite a challenge, what a challenge that was. And yet at the same time, cut our carbon footprint by 1/3. We've driven to record high levels of recycling, successfully opened and launched a leisure centre, a fantastic first year, and we've continued to deliver for next down. So it's a really tremendous record of achievement. I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself and I know all my colleagues. And I know I also speak on behalf of Councillor Thompson and myself in what I thank 3 members of Cabinet that have no longer in Cabinet, Neil Cutler, and thank them for all their work as part of the previous Cabinet, and I'm delighted that they're all taking on major roles as committee chairs or as deputy mayor. Okay. The next item of business is leader and cabinet member announcements. First of all, coming back to the point raised by Mr. Davis, is we are going to be reviewing the governance and process for major development projects. In our recent manifesto we put before the public, we promised stronger consultation, making sure that all voices are heard, and that we would work alongside the people and businesses of our area to the challenges we all view of process, the governance, the involvement is our first step on this. One of the points that Davis about the need for early involvement is absolutely at the heart of how we intend. So there are other improvements will be. My second announcement is I know some questions have been raised about the public area outside King. Work to replace the wall with fencing has now been completed, and there are some extra planters to be included as part of the plan as well. I would stress that this is a temporary and interim solution to improve the area, and more worked up proposals for the next stage of work, including the Middle Brook Street area in front of King's Walk courtyard, and further improvements in the aspects of the building facing onto Silver Hill and Tanner Street, being developed by architects working alongside key groups, including the tenants of King's Walk. These will be ready for sharing more widely, further engagement in the next. And my third announcement is that I had the honour and pleasure to represent the City Council at an expert panel meeting organised by Southampton as part of their UK City of Culture bid 2025. This is a huge opportunity for us as a city, market towns, as a district. And of course, it's a huge opportunity for Southampton as well. I had the chance to support their expert panel where they wanted to show the depth and breadth of support that they had from all different institutions in Southampton and across the south. and had the chance to speak to Lord Parkinson, the Arts Minister, about how important this bid is for us and how pleased and proud we are to work with Southampton and support their bid for UK City of Culture 2025. It's a huge opportunity for us, and we will do whatever we can to ensure that. I have two other Cabinet members that wish to make announcements. Lucille. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. Just one announcement from me. At the weekend, along with the Leader, I had the opportunity of visiting the Winchester Sports and Leisure Park, join in the celebrations of centres. It was a fantastic occasion. I was delighted to watch the big splash and see so many local children taking part. It was also really inspiring to see our Olympic champions, both at poolside and afterwards, happily signing many autographs, large queues of youngsters who were really eager to meet them. So my thanks goes to everyone active for hosting the event and attracting such an array of sporting excellence to join in our celebrations, and also to our own team here at the City Council for providing the extremely delicious cake, which we all enjoyed. A year on, and in spite of over 650,000 visitors coming through the doors, the centre was still looking fabulous. This truly is an excellent example of what can be achieved by working in collaboration with our partners, and it is a facility of which we should all be very proud. But of course, we cannot stand still, and as the Cabinet member responsible for the Leisure Centre, I'm really looking forward to working with our partners to ensure that the centre continues to improve and evolve and make sure that it continues to attract a growing number of visitors in the future.
Thank you. And I believe we have an announcement from Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. I also have one announcement to make today. I'm very pleased to announce that we are continuing to develop the support we offer to the Ukrainian refugees that have now arrived in our district, who will continue to arrive in numbers over the coming months. As part of that ongoing support, we'll be opening a new weekly community hub for Ukrainian families and their hosts in the Guildhall from Tuesday, the 7th of June. The hub will be open from 10 till 2 p.m. each Tuesday, and at the hub, families will be able to access support and advice from a multi-agency team, including our own WCC housing team and citizens advice. Initially, the hub will be open for a 4-week period, although this may be extended if it works well for the families. We're also looking at ways to provide more support in the market towns, where some of the families are actually located. So far, we've been pleased to welcome 73 Ukrainian families into our community, but there are many more families that have been matched with a host, and almost 1,000 people have registered in the district their interest in being a host family for the Ukrainian refugees. This is the highest number throughout Hampshire. So the number arriving is likely to continue to rise, and therefore we will be continuing to develop our strategy in conjunction with Hampshire County Council on how best to give them the very best support. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ferguson. I don't think there are any more announcements, so move to the next item of business, which is annual appointments to Cabinet informal groups and fora, which are on page 92 for those of you who have the complete. Now, I believe I have two councillors who are interested to speak on this. So I don't know who wishes to go first between Councillor Reid and Councillor Reid.
Leader, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. What I would like to say first of all is I think the southern parishes are probably feeling the same way as the town forum. So as I look round the table, I think everyone on it is from the northern part of Winchester, no one from the southern element, which has a large population. May I please clarify 11.8 on page 24, where it states that members have confirmed that they are content to continue virtual meetings. The representatives of the County Council, the Parish Council, Hampshire Borough Council and the Conservative members of Winchester City Council have not even been approached, let alone agreed. The Western Waterlooville MDA is the only area of development that is currently underway that crosses the boundary with another authority, Hampshire Borough Council. From the very start, the MDA, it was realised that there was a need to work with members across the two authorities to ensure the integration of the two communities. The centre of Waterlooville is approximately half a mile from the centre of Newlands parish. Not terribly far. It is true that the forum is not a decision-making body, but it requires two parties to work together, and that means that the members as well as officers. Parish Council of Newlands is a very new council, literally just 3 years old. It is probably, and I say this a little bit, going to take on the open space, the first part of the open space landscapes, which comes with it a fairly sizable sum of monies which have to be invested in order to maintain the service for at least 20 years, if not further. Over the past 2 years, the Joint Planning Committee has not met once to pass applications with regards to the MDA. Even when the Parish Council has requested for them to go to committee, it appears they have been all passed by officers. Not sure where integration stands between the two communities if you cannot meet and talk face to face with them. I would like to know how the integration can be achieved. I would like to know how the integration can be achieved without meetings. Is this greater than the financial cost, as appears in 11.13 on this paper? Leader, thank you once again for the opportunity to speak at Cabinet, and I hope that you will take on board the items regarding this rather unique element of the West of Waterlooville two communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Reid, for your input. And now, Councillor Horrell.
Chair, good morning and thank you for allowing me to speak. May I begin by offering you my congratulations, which I've done in private, but your congratulations as to your appointment as the new leader, and to all the Cabinet who will lead the City Council over the coming year. As a group, we look forward to working in partnership with you over some very important issues in the next new municipal year for the benefit of all residents of the Winchester district. And thank you, Chair, for agreeing some of the external appointments in advance and for allowing Conservative members to continue their representation of the district. I think it's just worth noting at this point that Conservative councillors are very keen and very happy to represent the council on external bodies, and may it have appropriate background and knowledge to support many organisations we've been asked to be involved with. And maybe collectively we can think about a different approach for future years when there is more consideration of some of these individuals. The other element I note, Chair, for today is in some cases vacancies are limited to a particular number. That applies on the member champion list. And I'm thinking to myself, why would we not have 2 champions? For example, equality, diversity and inclusion. Why are we going along potential party lines when we have 2 very capable councillors keen to make a difference and putting their ideas forward? So, Chair, I would ask you to perhaps think about that in terms of your commitment this morning to that broader representation and involving more where there is absolutely no logic in just allocating one individual. I think the same applies this morning to military contacts as well. You have excellent people with appropriate backgrounds who could represent the City Council well in some of those activities. So, Chair, I leave you with those thoughts and hope that they are beneficial in your consideration of the representation of Winchester City Council to the wider community. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, those comments, both to you and to Councillor Reid. There are a few technical comments I need to make before we start the discussion. So if you look at the paper as published, recommendations 4 and 5 of the report should be corrected to reference paragraph 11.20a and b respectively, rather than 8a and 11.8b. And the other thing to highlight with you is that we are proposing 8 nominations for Kings Barton Forum, although historically it's been 7. Let me just quickly run through then maybe each of the committees. I don't know if are there any general comments that anybody in Cabinet or questions that anybody in Cabinet might have? There are some questions that were raised from the floor that I think it would be useful to get input on, and I believe
in relation to Councillor Reid's comment, one of the first conversations I had, I can assure you that David and I work really well. I feel really strongly that the Southern
so I believe Julie Pinnock is here, who has responsibility for these overall committees. Do you have any comments or extra insight that you can provide on the question of what the consultation response was in terms of how these meetings should be run, Mrs. Pinnock?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to brief you today. First of all, the Cabinet member and I met with the chairs . Is that better? Yes, that's better for everyone, isn't it? The Cabinet member and I met with the chairs of the forums to discuss how we would progress, and then we raised that at I raised that at each of the meetings. And as I say, at the North Whiteley meeting, there were some concerns raised, and those are highlighted in your report today. But otherwise, we're content, in my view, to continue virtually. Yeah, and that's what I report to you in the paper.
Thank you very much indeed. It's very useful to have that perspective. So if we run through the issues that have been raised, so there's this question of what are the general views of how these meetings should be run, virtual versus in person. So I don't know if there are any cabinet members who have views on the issue. Councillor Learning.
Thank you. Certainly we found at the Kings Barton Forum that having virtual meetings worked really well, even though Kings Barton, is less than 2 miles away from the city centre. It particularly benefited people with young families who found it much easier to take part in the fora. And I do think there is a real inclusion issue when we're looking at these events about who can attend. I mean, obviously, ideally, we'd have hybrid events with that mix of in-person and the use of technology for quite a few things. But I think, given the costs involved, and certainly somewhere like Whiteley, west of Waterlooville, where the public transport is quite problematic, then certainly I think that for those public events, then virtual works much better.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this issue, particular issue?
We do recognise the value of face-to-face meetings. Really appreciated that. However, where both groups are happy, I would rather save the money that's spent on a physical meeting and use it for community events as and when issues where we need to. I think that would give us fund those events where engage with more.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. Listening, obviously, particularly where there are 2 parish councils, I take Councillor Reid your point about one of them new, so the relationship's still formed. The question I would perhaps ask, does it have to be one size fits all? Could it be that we have a particular meeting which is in person, then the rest of the meetings perhaps virtual? I know there are costs involved, but if like there are specific issues, perhaps at the beginning of the year, I don't know, but do we have to have one size?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I think, Councillor Porter.
And so I think it's about the relationships between people as well. If people know those people well when they start the meetings, they feel confident that they can trust what they're seeing on the screen, that's really important too. So I do appreciate what Ferguson is saying. There are other ways of doing that rather than in that first big meeting. Certainly the public that have been involved in the past in online meetings find them less intimidating. Sitting here, as many of the councillors find, we do find that intimidation means that people don't come that first, do come on. I think there's a work to be done to establish the trust between people. It means that when they come to the meeting, either virtually or online, they feel the same about that.
Thank you, Councillor Porter, and thank you, colleagues, for all your comments, and thank you for Councillor Reid in particular for raising the issue. It strikes me that there are probably 2 issues here. So one is how we run the meetings themselves, where the experience of Kings Barton Forum, which I've been a member of, which is, I think, the biggest and most successful meeting, although arguably the one where we would have least geographic challenge in terms of bringing people together, should we choose to do so. There's that is probably the right format for the forum meeting. But I hear very strongly from Councillor Reid that we need to make sure that we're bringing together the people who will be looking at that area. I have discussed with officers that I want to meet the leader of all our neighbouring authorities. And I'm very happy to work with Councillor Reid and the other councillors in Denmead and Southwark and Wickham, who have particular interest in this area, to make sure that we get the full engagement, both sides of the border, that is needed in order for the governance and the involvement west of Waterlooville area to work properly. That may involve in-person meeting, but I suggest that's not done as the forum. It's probably an informal get-to-know-each-other type activity where we need to maybe bring people together to talk about how we're going to work together effectively with the institutions available to us. So I'm very happy to work with the ward councillors in Denmead and Southwark and Wickham, as well as the Newlands Parish Council, haven't, in order to make that work. And I will happily to discuss that with you outside this meeting. But I think we will stay with virtual for the forums for the time being. What also may be helpful is if the chairs of the forums can get together and maybe learn from each other what works well in terms of making that kind of meeting work. I'd like now to just quickly run through the appointments. We haven't had any particular discussion or comments on the cabinet appointments, so I'm happy to run through that fairly quickly. So the first one is the Local Plan Advisory Committee. Is everybody agreed with that? The second one, Strategic Asset Purchase Board. Treasury Investment Group. Kings Barton Forum with 8 members rather than the 7. West of Waterlooville Forum. North Whiteley Development Forum. On the Central Winchester Regeneration Open Forum and the Station Approach Open Forum, we will come back with a separate proposal following the discussion about governance, but I would like to reassure opposition and backbench councillors that they will definitely have a role in any structures that we come forward. The Winchester Sport and Leisure Park Advisory Board meeting. The Carbon Neutrality Open Forum. The structure of this was agreed, I think, in about June 2021, following a verbal report by Councillor Murphy to Cabinet. And as currently structured, the member, it's listed with one member, which is the chairperson, Councillor Lerney, and other people are invited as needed to those meetings. But I note the 2 names put forward by the Conservative group, and we will ensure that invited along with similar representatives from the Democrat group to any such open forum. But the official appointment that we're making today is Councillor Lerney, because that's the way it works constitutionally. We have the member champion roles. The cabinet member for Policy, Diversity and Inclusion is Councillor Gordon Smith. That's my appointment. What else get to say, unfortunately, under the Constitution. We have a report coming in June about the Members' Equality and Diversity Forum. The idea has been raised of having more than one member champion. I'd be interested in views.
It should be easier. I to talk to their fellow councillors. I would hate to put off answering to 2 people. Responding to these very
Well, of course, champions traditionally were individuals who were put forward in front of opposing armies to batter away at each other rather than involving the whole army. And that would be my worry, that it would be seen as a conflict. I don't know whether one could have a secondary role in some case, but as Councillor Power said, might be confusion about who was speaking to the officers about what, and if there were conflicting views.
Yeah, I think this is quite a tricky one in terms of who has the visibility and the responsibility for pushing on these issues. I can certainly see why we might like to have deputies, but on the other hand, we have also members of the Liberal Democrat group who, if there was a deputy going, might have liked to put their name forward too. So I'm slightly conflicted on this because I can certainly see why it would be good to have members of the opposition who are keeping on board with this. I don't know if there's some other way of doing it rather than having two champions, so I think we need to think about that one.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. The whole point is the champion is that person who's answerable and collates the views of everybody and also leads on that from that. I fully understand why, as an opposition member, you want another champion, but actually that's an opposition appointment in your own group. Then that person discuss as they wish with the council's champion, that champion, what their comments issues were. I do think, as Councillor Power said, it's confusing to have two. It's a responsibility of the opposition to find a way of connecting that back to our champion.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I noticed that the paper talks about numbers of vacancies, 1. I think some of these have been agreed in previous cabinet reports. Just clarify the status.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that, Leader. So in respect of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Member Champion, this actually was a suggestion and recommendation that came from the Governance Committee that undertook the early review of our work on equalities to update our policy and to have an action plan. So that was a recommendation that came to Cabinet. And after the council meeting, where there was significant party support in relation to the City of Sanctuary, it was recommended that there could also be a champion in this area to drive forward work in that area. At that time, the recommendation was that there would be one champion, and that's what's before you today.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful and useful perspective. So, as I understand it, other parts of the council, particularly full council, have set the number at 1 in certain cases. But I would like to thank the Conservatives for putting forward names and showing that they have members who are interested in this work. So what I propose is that for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Member Champion, that be Councillor Becker. For Sanctuary Champion, that be Councillor Tippett-Cooper. For Armed Forces Champion, that should be the but I will ask that in all cases they do reach out and meet regularly, if possible, with those Conservative members who've expressed interest in this work. And indeed, I notice we have the new Green Councillor for the City Council here, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to meet you on any of those issues that you wish to talk about as well. So my proposal is Councillor Becker, Councillor Tippett-Cooper and Councillor Green for those 3 roles, but I will ask them personally to make sure that they engage with those members from other groups who have expressed interest in those areas. Is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is the appointment to external bodies. Councillor Horrell, am I to take that your previous deputation covers this area as well?
Chair, thank you. Yes, you and I discussed this list yesterday, and I think my previous comments apply. So, thank you. I think we can. You can move.
Thank you very much indeed. So, I suggest Cabinet, we quickly jump through the ones where there's not much to talk about. So I'm assuming everybody's happy with table 1, where there are no appointments required at this time, and table 2, which are automatic appointments for relevant cabinet members, and table 3, which are no contest appointments. And I would highlight that this is one where there are cross-party appointments, and I'm pleased that members of the Conservative group will be representing the council. Obviously, I'm even more pleased that there are lots of members of the Liberal Democrat group that are representing the council as well. We then move on to table 4, where there are more nominations and vacancies, and I have proposals on each of these. Your agreement. So we have for the Carroll Centre Board of Trustees, we have 3 nominations: Councillor Becker, Councillor Clear as deputy, and Councillor Cook. My proposal go with Councillor Becker and Councillor Deputy. Is that agreed? For the Hampshire Cultural Trust, there is 1 place which is automatic to the cabinet member for Councillor Thompson, 1 observer. 2 names have been put forward for observer: Councillor Laming, Councillor Pearson. My proposal is that we go with Councillor Laming. On play to the crowd, we had there are 2 names that have been put forward: Councillor Atchell and Councillor Kern. Having discussed this with colleagues, I'm of the view that it's actually important that the Cabinet Member for Culture has a direct relationship with play to the crowd, so I would propose Councillor as our observer. That agreed. On the Police and Crime panel, we have a proposal of Councillor Power, Deputy Councillor Clear, and Councillor Bolton. I would propose that we go with Councillor Power and Deputy Councillor Clear. Agreed. Southampton International Airport Consultative Committee, we have a cabinet member responsibility for transport, plus 1 other rep, plus 2 deputies. The names we have put forward are Councillor Lerney as the cabinet member, Councillor Atwell and Councillor Cook as full members, Councillor Bronk as deputy. I would propose that we go with Councillor Lerney as the cabinet member, Councillor Atwell as the full member, Councillors Bronk and Cook as the 2 deputies. Agreed. For Street Reach, we have 2 nominations: Councillor Batho and Councillor Horrell. I propose that we go with Councillor Batho. Agreed. For Trinity Winchester, we have 3 representatives: the cabinet member with responsibility for housing, plus 2 additional councillors. The cabinet member responsibility for housing is Councillor Ferguson. 3 other names nominated: Councillor Clear, Councillor Horrell, and Councillor Scott. I've spoken to Councillor Correll as group leader of Conservatives and agreed that the other 2 names, Councillor Clear and Councillor Horrell. Is that agreed? The Winchester Charity School Education Foundation, we have 4 nominations and 2 places: Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Atchwell, Isaacs, and Bolton. I propose that we go with Councillor Ferguson and Councillor. Is that agreed? Winchester Excavations Committee, we have 2 nominations: Councillor Clear and Councillor Reid. I propose that we go with Councillor Clear. Is that agreed? For Winchester Housing Trust, we have 1 nomination: Director, which would be Councillor Ferguson as the housing portfolio, and 2 nominations for Observer: Councillor Westwood and Councillor Horrell. Is that agreed? The Winchester Road Safety Council, we have 2 nominations: Councillor Westwood and Councillor Bolton. I've spoken to Councillor Westwood about this and I propose that we go with Councillor Bolton. Is that agreed? And the Sports Stadium Management Committee, and I would stress this is not the same as the Open Forum Leisure Park. We have 2 representatives: the Cabinet responsibility for sport and 1 other representative The proposal is Councillor Thompson, Councillor Laming. Councillor Cook is not, but I propose Councillor Thompson and Councillor Laming. Is that agreed? On the Winchester Welfare Charities, slightly complicated position. So Councillor McLean's term of office is expiring and there is a new 4-year term of office. One trustee. Councillor Power is currently the other trustee but asked her to stand down. So my proposal is that Councillor Atchwell, so the two names have been put forward, Councillor Atchwell and Councillor McLean. My proposal is that Councillor Atchwell replace Councillor McLean term and that Councillor McLean replace Councillor Power for the remaining 2 years. That agreed. Very much indeed. And thank you to Councillor Horrell and to the group managers for all their work in order to put lists together. The next item on the agenda is the Q3 Finance and Performance Monitoring report. And I know that Councillor Horrell, who chairs the performance panel that reviews detail, wishes to make it. So come forward.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak again. Yes, just briefly, Q3 seems quite a way ago now, given all that we've been up to in the last few months. But I wanted to make sure that the Cabinet, because not all members were participating in full at that time, understood that the approach that the performance panel takes, the papers are issued in advance to everyone. Advanced questions are then posed by panel members, and officers do a great job in actually trying to answer as many of those in advance of the panel session. The panel then actually asks further questions when they meet and review literally page by page on each of the reports. The panel has made some recommendations in that process about how some of those pieces of information might be enhanced going forward and be more meaningful for everyone. And obviously the full report from the panel is then given to the scrutiny committee, who can then address further questions if they so wish. But we've obviously done the detailed legwork for the scrutiny panel. That also goes obviously to all members of the council. So the scrutiny meeting in public reviews everything that has been prepared and obviously agrees any further actions as recommended by the panel or indeed other members of scrutiny. So I think, Chair, it has allowed the time to review the information in detail, because obviously it's a very significant piece of work that takes up a considerable time on an already busy scrutiny agenda. We thank officers particularly for giving us the feedback and then following up post the panel meeting if there are questions that are outstanding. That then can be tabled back to the scrutiny committee with those further additional pieces of information. So, Chair, I believe the panel has done due diligence. It's a cross-party panel, and I hope that the Cabinet will see value in the document before you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Horrell, for your input. It's a fairly substantial report, and we have in front of us, and it relates to a period that is now 5.5 months ago. I'm happy to go through it in sections, and if there is anything that people wish to highlight or talk about, but I think there is also a point to have a conversation about process and speed of processing, because I think there is a point here where having the final Cabinet discussion about the lessons learned from October, November, December in the middle of May, just we haven't quite got our learning cycle fast enough. Right, okay.
I would just say that between the performance process in terms of the collation of the data to go into the paper, does mean there's a 4 to 6 week turn, and it goes through cycles. So after it went to performance, there were only 11 working days before the election period, and there wasn't a cabinet meeting too. So that's why this one does always feel, because we have that pre-election period. Just to let you know, that is why we will look at that, because it does just feel so.
Yeah, I think if you could look at the process, and I would stress that cabinet members have been involved in the process. So a lot of the detailed discussions about the nature of this paper have already happened. Cabinet members have been in the room with members of the scrutiny committee, and ultimately that is the important thing that happens. I'll quickly introduce it and talk through it, and then maybe the two highlighted points. The overall, this report shows very solid progress against our council priorities. The way it's structured is, first there's a narrative account of how we're doing versus the priorities laid out in the council plan, tackling the climate emergency, living well, homes for all, vibrant local economy, and quote, your services, your voice. And it shows strong progress in all of those areas. There's then a section that talks about our financial position, and that really has been overtaken by events, since quite a lot has happened since then, not least the passing of the new budget, as well as insight on the general fund and the housing revenue account. There's then a review of the strategic KPIs, project highlights report, including Bar End, the carbon neutral programme, Central Winchester, local plan, new homes programme, Winchester movement strategy, and COVID KPIs. Winchester movement strategy, and then a final section on COVID KPIs. I'm not sure it's particularly helpful for us to go through all of that in more detail. Cabinet members are taking on their new responsibilities, but it is definitely worth a read to make sure that each of the areas that you are now responsible for, you can see what was going on in October, November, December, and any comments that were made by the performance panel, as well as made in the report itself. There were two main recommendations coming out of the performance panel that were then endorsed by the scrutiny committee, which I think it is worth having a brief discussion about. A request for future meetings would be that the minutes of the scrutiny committee are also included, since they've also talked to this and they are the parent committee of the performance panel, and sort of crystallise down what the most important issues for us to talk about are. So the two recommendations that came out of report from the performance panel to the scrutiny committee was a reference to the fact that part of this process, although it's not included in this report bundle, there was a discussion of end of project reports. Feedback from the scrutiny committee is that is very valuable work, and I think it's something that those cabinet would be interested in seeing and getting sight of. So they support the idea that we have a disciplined process for reporting on at the end of projects, and the lessons learned that can be applied to the rest of the council. And then the second thing they talked about, the second recommendation that they asked us to consider as a scrutiny committee, is that they highlighted that a review of the key performance indicators used as part of the quarterly performance reports would be appropriate. And there was a suggestion that this be done as part of the review of the council plan over the summer. I don't know what people's reaction to that as a proposal is. Yes, it sounds like quite a good, but I'll be interested in other people's views.
Thank you, Leader. I have only recently joined the Cabinet, very recently, and obviously sat on scrutiny and also sat on the performance panel. So have been through the entire process of how closely that we look at these numbers for this report. I just really wanted to comment about the end of project report. I think it's felt that often, there are many things that go well when we manage our projects, and we could learn from what went well as equally as looking and evaluating what perhaps we could do better next time. And it is a case that at the moment that information doesn't appear to be available, and I would certainly welcome that. My frustration with some of the KPIs is that they just take so long to materialize that, you know, they only come around once a year and then we have the lag or the delay. So it is actually quite hard to monitor performance. So I would actually welcome looking at those again and seeing if they are exactly fit for purpose in terms of what we're trying to achieve as an administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with what Councillor up against our priority. Get to look at pressure of council. As far as an end of my only concern put an onerous amount of work on our officers. Setting tasks. Down in a quick and if you don't mind, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you. I think the performance panels, I grant you they're time consuming, but I think they're quite a useful way of working, really dig into the detail. KPIs have obviously been rather distorted by COVID, which has rather thrown some of the conclusions. Most there is no conclusion. But I think this is the way one has a constant improvement process, is to go over these things. I think end of project reporting, I think that's absolutely essential. Otherwise, just keep on doing the same mistake over and over again. And as we know, our mistakes are very published. We need to polish on that. I think also we need to try to achieve clarity in the KPIs. Some of them are very difficult to puzzle out what it means, and actually having a brief statement at the end about what the conclusions are. But I think it's a good way to work, and having a debrief afterwards, all the projects, not having it as a sort of blame culture, but a learning process is essential. And that way we really slowly but incrementally improve how things work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Leader. I'm a great fan of end of project. I think it gives us an opportunity to celebrate what's gone well, and also to where we could do better. I recognise the load on officers, but I think if they feel that those are celebrated and make a difference, they should be very beneficial. Regarding KPIs, having had the benefit of, they don't all mean something to the general population. And I think we are pressing it an open, find more meaningful KPIs and fewer of them. Now, the general population program I think as officers, we
Thank you, Councillor Power. Mrs. Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. If it's helpful for Cabinet to understand, we have a Programme and Capital Strategy Board, and it is a requirement of that process that end of project reports come to that board. So quite simply, we now forward those on after going to that board of officers into the committee, as there had been plenty of conversations, particularly at Audit and Governance, in respect of how we review our projects at the. That is already.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful, and thank you everybody for all your comments. The recommendation is that we note the progress achieved during Q3 of 21-22 and endorse the contents of the report, which I think we're all happy to do. But I would also add our thanks to the work of the Scrutiny Committee and the Performance Panel for their work doing this, and also to restate our commitment that we are a learning council, that we use this process to improve what we do. That we welcome the use of end of project reports and the wider sharing of those in order to embed the learnings. I think there is a question as to whether we can find a way of running the cycle faster in the future. And I would endorse, I think we should endorse the Scrutiny Committee's request that we review interest in that. Some of the comments about simpler list and that is more timely and doesn't just say, well, in a year's time we'll know how we did 2 years ago, will be helpful as well. So I think some very useful comments there. Ultimately, this is about being a learning council and making sure that we're learning our successes, learning from things that maybe aren't as successful, and reflecting on the progress that we've made. Because the main thanks that need to be made are to all the officers who did all the work that is being reported in here. And we're very, very grateful for all their hard work and service to the people. So, do people broadly agree with those recommendations and points? Thank you very much indeed. And the last item for discussion is the forward plan for June. Any comments or questions on that? Take that as agreed. Thank you all very much indeed. I believe that represents completion of all the business on the agenda in front of us today. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who's came. Thank you to the members of the public and the other councillors who have come. Thank you for the officers for their support, and of course my cabinet colleagues for their support and agreement to the plans in front of us today. Declare the meeting.